Hello, welcome. Welcome back to another Onkruid video. Welcome back to another unedited Soulstone Survivors video. Second map, no curses with the Houndmaster, just having fun. All we need to do is kill enemies, so it doesn't really matter what type of game mode we choose, how far we go, which curses we have on or do not have on, which character we use, it all doesn't matter anymore. All we need to do is just play the game. And then we will be completely completed. Then we will have completely completed, rather. It's been a while since I've 100%ed the game, if I have ever done that, really. And it's kind of a false 100%, right? Because we are still in early access, so new features will get added, which will make the 100% go away. If everything goes right, and that would be extremely nice, maybe, just maybe, if the world is a just place, I can hold off on recording the last 30 episodes of this series, and I can wait for them to maybe add on some new little features so that we have some incentive to go for. Because otherwise, we will have to start scraping the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the bucket, really, I think because, well, frag shot? Let's go for frag shot. We picked singular focus so we can go for a meme build a little bit, but I'm not sure which ability I want to be the center of attention yet. Alright, what are we gonna talk about today? That's a great question asked by you. A question I should know the answer to, and I kind of do. Last night when I was walking from the station to my home, I always walk lately because I don't want to spend €2.50 on the short bus fare to get from the station to my house, even though it is like an half an hour to 40-minute walk. I would gladly do that. Also helps me clear out my mind a little bit. While doing that walk, I was listening to a podcast by the TEDx people. Podcast called something like How to Be a Better Human, something like that, at least in that trend. Kind of a great title if you ask me, if that is like the actual title. Weakening grenade, sure. Don't think we're necessarily going to be keeping that, but for now it will be fine. And this episode was with a journalist. I can't remember her name. I know that was a female journalist from Mexican descent, living in Seattle, living in Seattle in the USA. And she wrote this book on what she calls, I never thought of it that way moments. The main focus of her book is something that interests me very much because it is in the field of communication, and I recognize communication as being one of the key endeavors we humans can embark on together. It's really like such an underappreciated skill to have, communicating clearly and saying what you actually need to say, nothing more, nothing less. Either way, I digress. Her book and her podcast episode, therefore, and her TED Talk kind of was all about how people from opposite sides of a spectrum can communicate. So, because it was America, a very prominent example that immediately comes to mind is left-wing versus right-wing people. How can they have like a civil conversation, putting their differences aside, or even accepting their differences, and from their differences making the conversation even more worthwhile for both parties involved? That makes any sense. Instead of immediately starting off from a point where you are like, all right, this person is wrong and I am right, so this conversation has as a goal, I need to convert them to my point of view. Her standpoint was all about trying to have a meaningful conversation where you start from a point of open arms and an open mind. Not immediately think about changing that other person's point of view and that your point of view is superior, because it doesn't necessarily have to be. And the most important question, no, not the most important question, the most important feeling, the most important thought you can have in such conversations is, I never thought about it that way. And one of the beautiful things she also talked about is the difference in communicating because of truth and communicating in terms of meaning. When we go into conversations with people that have an opposite point of view from ours, we think of it as a conversation where truth has to prevail. And in our eyes, truth is our point of view. That has to be the truth, yeah, right? We have to be correct. Instead, the journalist on this podcast episode advises us to look at conversations from a standpoint of meaning. Instead of trying to convince them of our standpoint, try to understand what their standpoint means for them. Why do they hold on to their standpoint? Why do they vote for Trump? Why do they think that climate change is a hoax? Don't necessarily brush it away because you don't agree with it, because you think climate change is a very real and severe threat to society as we know it, and we should definitely do something about it. Whereas we, is both us individuals and the larger corporations in the world that make up most of the emissions of the human population, actually. And if somebody else is like, nah, I don't think that's real at all. I think that's a hoax. I think we should just use plastic bags, plastic straws. I think it doesn't matter. Instead of immediately going into the attack mode and being like, how can you say such a thing? Don't you realize how much colder and warmer it has been getting? Have you never seen those pictures of like the polar bears getting stuck in the water because they don't have anything to stand on anymore? How can you be so heartless? Try to ask like, oh, really? Why? Why do you think that? And question that immediately comes to mind that a lot of people will get into, I think, is what's your evidence? What are some of the arguments behind that? But then you are leaning over back to the conversation of truth, where you feel like these people needs to prove that what they are saying is actually the case in reality, is the actual God's honest truth. And that's not what it's about. It's why. What does that mean for you? What does it do for you if global warming would not actually be true? Why do you feel this way? What makes you feel this way? And just let the conversation be there, you know? The conversation has to be there. The conversation has to be allowed. If you start from the standpoint of this person is wrong, you are not gonna have a very fruitful conversation, that's for sure. Be open towards their point of view, and that's difficult. That is definitely a kind of skill you can practice. The podcast host, a comedian, I believe, I kind of forgot his name. The podcast host had this beautiful metaphor of, especially when it comes to climate change, for example. If you are convinced of climate change being real and the clock running out, we are in our final hours of doing something about it, it will be very, very difficult for you to not immediately jump into, but no, what are you talking about? We do have to change climate change. Haven't you seen this and this and this? Haven't you seen this evidence? You want to fight for it, you know? And the podcast host compared it to being in a house that is on fire. And then what the journalist was trying to tell us is like, study fire first. Learn a bit more about fire. Be open to the fire. Whereas the podcast host said in such situations where he would then talk to a climate change denier, he wants to start spraying water everywhere. He wants to start diminishing the problem. He wants to actively do something about the problem in his eyes of that other person believing that the other side of things is true, the other side of the story is actually true, and that climate change is not real. And it's very recognizable for me. I can be a very stubborn person trying to always get my way, especially in discussions and conversation. I love a good healthy discussion, but I know for a fact that I should definitely in the future focus a bit more on not remaining on my side, but really looking for those opportunities, those situations where you think, I never looked at it that way before, because I think that are one of the most productive kinds of conversations. And it requires you to realize that you might not always have the most based takes on subjects. You might not always be truth-pilled. Sometimes you have to really open your arms to other people. Except when you get people that are like, oh, but vaccines cause autism, then you can just spit on them. You don't need to listen to them with an open mindset. You can safely spit on them. You have my permission to spit on those people. They don't know what they're talking about. Which is a bit satire, but then again a bit not. It's a bit satire because I just told you that's something you shouldn't do, but in that specific case, those people, their argument for truth is, yeah, but it is true, there is a bunch of research, but the mainstream media just doesn't want to publish that truth. And that's, I mean, we're not gonna get into it in this video, no. We're gonna keep this family friendly, just a nice little discussion about the podcast episode I listened to. It was a hard decision for me to either listen to the podcast and really be focused on that, or keep my headset or my earplugs, my earbuds out of my ears and focus on all my senses in the walk home. Because I have been trying to live a bit more mindfully, live a bit more present, live a bit more, as Russ Harris calls it, in contact with the present life, being in touch with it. with all your sensations, all your bodily sensations, and how they interact with the world. And in the meantime, I'm also trying to learn more. So that's why completely focusing my attention on one specific podcast episode or something else that I can learn from is also important. Or when I do decide to just listen to music, really listening to that music. Having my ears fully opened to all the possibilities, to all the little notes, to all the little nooks and crannies of the melodies that are blasting into my eardrums, you know? Getting transported straight into the auditory cortex of my plane. My plane? I have a plane inside here, it's not even just a brain. It's an A4100 Boeing. If that is a real plane model, you can donate $5 to my Patreon, because I just took that straight out of the top of my dome piece. If it's not a real plane, well then now you know why. Now you know why. I'm not a person that likes to fly. I like going on vacation, of course, especially if it's a vacation filled with reading, chill days, but also hikes and exploring. Switzerland is always beautiful, but I don't like flying. Once we're in the air, I am kind of okay. I'm calm, I'm chill, I'm calm and collected, I'm cool, I'm relaxed. But takeoff and landing, not my favorite activities to partake in. And that's why I never clap. That's why I never clap when we land the plane. I never applaud. Sure, the pilot deserves some recognition. He is doing a bang-ass job if we all survive. And I think that most of the time in a plane, either you all survive or none of you survive. Unless you're like that group of people in the mountains that had to cannibalize themselves or each other, and where you can see in the pictures like the human spines lying around there. It's a fucked up picture if you ever want to look that up. But otherwise, I think the survival rate on planes is most of the time 100% or 0%. Especially when it comes to plane crashes. There have definitely probably been situations where a person, just like one person, dies on a plane from a heart attack or something. Not that I have like specific recognition of like, yeah, that happened on January 1st, 2011. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I can assume that it has definitely happened in the past. Yeah, no, not such a well-flown individual. I'm not such a well-flown individual. I'm truly a master of words. I'm not so into being in planes. Man, my words just don't land. I think my brain is fried a bit. It's been a long day already. I've tried to record a bunch of videos. I've tried to record another League of Legends video, but still the game was a piece of hot trash as well, and my team was getting me a little tilted, so that's why I stopped recording that. Either way, I started recording Soulstone Survivors right now though, and to end this very short video off, I'm just gonna go straight into that end portal. I think we are at like 91% in terms of our achievement, so we still have quite a long way to go, and we still have quite a lot of episodes to record either way, so it all works out. It's all coming up Millhouse, if you will. 91, almost 92%. Hope to see you in the next one. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.